Nisha, would you take the floor and start our meeting today with updates from KPAC? Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy, so much. Great to be with all of you as always on these monthly calls. It's great to see so many familiar faces and names. Just a brief update on some of the work that KPAC's doing right now. And then I think there's probably a number of things that many of our speakers today will be covering that are also on our radar as well. But I wanted to just start by just giving a quick update. I know that many folks have been seeing this article around the NIH and profiling happening at the NIH, and I'm sure there's more discussion to come on that, but I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware. We've seen it, we're figuring out, and we're happy to hear from you all as well on it, but it is certainly on our radar, and it's something that has been brought up to our members as well, so they're aware, and we're working on how we can be helpful. I think whether that's using the tools available to us as a congressional caucus to help get more information. We're certainly working on that, but I just wanted to start with putting it out there that I know many of you have been instrumental in making sure that when things like this come up, you all send it to us, and we really appreciate that. So it's certainly on our radar, just going into kind of the rest of this call. And to that point, whether it comes to what we are seeing about this investigation in the NIH, but also, we've been talking for the past year plus now about the end of the China initiative and what that means moving forward. But I also wanted to flag specifically that one of the things we're doing across a number of different issues is trying to work really closely with the minority members of the Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. Specifically, the minority members are the one specifically because that includes members of KPAC, including their ranking member of that committee. And so when we're hearing some of these things, we're also trying to make sure that without necessarily knowing how that committee's agenda is going to play out, that we're flagging some of these issues, right? Whether that's the introduction of a bill to reinstate the China initiative or these types of concerning reports coming out of what's happening at the NIH, we're also making sure that they're also aware of these pieces. It's sometimes, I think, when you're siloed and not doing this as a day job, as many of us it's hard to see kind of the bigger picture of what's going on across a number of different sectors and spaces. And so while they're talking about a number of other issues, we want to make sure the treatment of our folks here, our scientists or researchers, a lot of what we talk about on these calls is also on their radar. So I just wanted to also make sure you're aware that we're working closely with them on that. And to that point, in terms of a lot of things happening up here, we are also aware that we have a bill that was introduced at the federal level that would essentially do something similar to the Texas alien land laws, but similar to State Bill 147, that is now a federal bill that's been introduced that does much of the same thing, and all of our concerns are very much the same. And so it's something where, I think it was last month, KPAC put out a statement from all of our leadership members, kind of as a whole across the board on these types of legislation at any level, whether that's federal, state, or local. And so we'll be re-upping that as a response. But that's one of the other things that legislatively we're keeping our eye on here on the Hill. And then the only other thing I just wanted to flag briefly in terms of what we're working on, one, as some of you may know, in terms of data equity, the comment period for the Directive 15 around race and ethnicity, specifically around revisions to the 1997 federal minimum data standard, is coming up next week, I believe, is the deadline. So that's something that is certainly on our radar as data equity and data segregation across all of the work that the caucus does. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that I think it was actually not last week, but the week before, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights had a briefing on the federal response to anti-Asian hate and racism. There's also public comments open there through I think it's in a couple of weeks it's due, but that's certainly something where KPAC will be weighing in with comments as well. Those are all the updates I have at this time. Happy to take more specific questions as needed. And you all know how to reach me as well. So feel free to drop an email if there's anything else we can answer for you.
Thank you, Nisha. And we'll definitely post your email in the summary as well as in the newsletter so people can reach you directly. Paula, would you take the floor for up to 10 minutes and share your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm going to just talk about something that's not necessarily revolutionary, but I don't think it's been pulled together the way that I'm about to propose. Certainly spurred by the bill AB 147, I reached out to a number of friends and organizations and began to agitate from the perspective that what we know is that while this bill was introduced in Texas, the implications nationally and even globally were huge. You did hear earlier that I come from a background and a career as a journalist. I haven't been a working journalist for many years, but my last job in journalism was I ran the news department for NBC at the station in New York, NBC4. And I have a history in print journalism as well as television journalism. Having said that, what I'm hoping we can rally around is something that John raised. And I think that Nisha mentioned it when she talked about being in silos. What I'm hoping is that there will be some consideration given to forming in a more formalized fashion, a task force or a monitoring group that will go across a variety of organizations, so that what happens is that when there are issues dealing with anti-Asian hatred or speech or behavior, xenophobia, all the things that we were talking about, that what we have is in effect a strike force. And this force would be comprised of individuals from throughout our communities who are well-versed and well-respected and credentialed and have the ability to speak clearly and effectively about this particular matter. For example, right now, what it feels like is we're kind of in a position where when something is said, we respond, we react. When something is done, we respond, we are reacting. What I would propose is that we go on the offensive, that in this task force or strike group, that what we do is employ certain kinds of strategies. New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, USA Today, all of these publications have editorial boards. If you have enough of a portfolio of credibility, you actually can make an appointment to go meet with the editorial board and have a meeting to talk about how a particular issue is being framed by them or not being addressed by them, and or we could propose who we would like to provide to them to better educate the editorial boards. Now, the editorial boards are separate from the reporters, right? The editorial boards are the ones that would write the editorials and who approve and will publish the op-ed pieces, letters to the editor. So what I'm proposing here is that within the print context of journalism, that we actually go on an offensive. So whether we're talking about Officer Anwang, whether we're talking about scientists who have been unfairly persecuted, whether we're talking about xenophobia and the fear of China, that what we do is we go on a campaign to educate and inform, and importantly, when articles, stories, reports are shared with the public and they contain factual or I'll call discriminatory or racist depictions and language, that we have the kind of relationship that results in them either correcting the misinformation or joining us in trying to properly educate a public that is now being frightened into considering that anything that is from the East, anything that's Chinese or Chinese-like is scary and dangerous to the United States. When we take a look at Sunday morning television shows, for example, whether it's the Meet the Press or programs like that, we actually should get on their agendas to have people who are well-spoken, who accurately represent our communities, to appear on these programs to talk about these issues and to confront this head on. Not so much in a way that we are stirring a pot, but remember, in the past 2 years, take a look at how much attention has been paid to anti-Asian hate. We've never seen this kind of coverage in the past. And what I would maintain is that right now is a time when many of the journalism organizations, when the news organizations are willing to hear our perspectives, are willing to hear and to pretty much consider that people of the Asian diaspora are not scary people, that we actually are US citizens, and those of us who are not US citizens and who were not born here, naturalized or otherwise, there is no agenda that ties us to a foreign nation that means that none of us can be trusted. So what I'm getting at here is, I really am talking about something that has been tried and true. You probably have figured out that I'm mixed race with African. My family is Chinese Jamaican. But if we take into account the strategies that we've seen used effectively in the African American community, Black community, in the Latino, Hispanic communities, what we've seen is that there is already a playbook in existence that I think we could adopt many of those same strategies, and not in our own silo. I will talk for just a moment about what we have here in Los Angeles. In March of 2020, I became very, very concerned at what I was seeing on the news, right, which is a medium that I had a major impact on, right, in another time in my career. I became very concerned when I saw, after the murder of Mr. George Floyd, that we saw protesting in the streets people of the Gen Z or millennial era. It looked as though only young people were concerned about these heinous events, but these young people who were being depicted were of every race, all kinds of nationalities, multi-gendered, and yet when there were comments being sought about from people my age, I'm 70, it was more racially siloed, right? So you get a response from an African American or a response. So Gay Yuen, who is the chair of the Friends of the Chinese American Museum of Los Angeles, and I'm on the board, I called Gay and said I was very concerned about this. We both reached out to 2 congresswomen, one Judy Chu and one Barbara Lee. Judy Chu, as you know, is from Southern California. Barbara Lee is African American from Northern California. And what we asked them to consider are the optics. What is it looking like to a viewing public when we're seeing civil rights being abridged the way they had been? And what we're only seeing are young people marching arm in arm, but the older generations appear to be very siloed. The next week, Judy and Barbara had a joint news conference in Washington with the caucuses, Congressional Black Caucus, the AAPI Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, and then the indigenous members of Congress. And they stood up to say that we are all in this together, right? What happened here in Los Angeles was I contacted my friends who are in the AAPI, African American, Latino community, and said, together, from the perspective of civic leadership, we probably, if we aggregated all of our times, it might come to 1,000 years. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of us were pretty old. But my point was that we have been meeting for at least 90 minutes weekly since March of 2020. We have met with the police chief of Los Angeles via Zoom. We've met with the new sheriff of Los Angeles, who was a candidate, via Zoom. We've met with various and sundry civic leaders. And behind the scenes, what we've been pushing is how we have to come together as communities. But importantly, one of the messages that we've been pushing has been the disrespect, I put that in quotes, towards the AAPI community. That instances of slights for the AAPI community occur in ways that would never exist for the African American community and never exist for the Latino community. And having said that, what I want to put forth to this group is that I recognize the Confucianism of don't make waves, don't be too loud, right? Try to get along. And my concern about that is that in this nation, in this society, those values are not held high generally. And so consequently, I think that there is a stereotyping that goes on of people of the AAPI community are model minorities in that they're quiet and they don't make waves and they don't create concerns nor issues. I am imploring this group to consider that that's not serving us. Those stereotypes, for however incorrect they may be, or whether there's a kernel of truth in them, right now is a time where, as we've seen in a variety of ways in this society, including, by the way, the Academy Awards, right? But we're beginning to see some willingness to be more accepting of maybe there has been discrimination. Maybe we're not being fair. So maybe that door is opening a bit. But again, when we take a look at the xenophobia, that door slams shut right away. And my proposal to this group is that come together, form a strike team, a task force that takes a look at not only media, but legislative actions that will actually serve to push our communities farther into the realm of mysterious and fearful and cannot be trusted because they're not really Americans. And with that, I would pause and be open to having any questions now or later.
Thank you, Paula. And in our discussion, you name a number of national organizations who should participate. And in addition to that, I think a number of organizations have also responded favorably or interested in your idea. So we have a number of them on the panel here, and I would suggest going through some of them and request their reaction to your idea. And I would suggest that after the meeting, perhaps at a convenient time for everybody to come together in some sort of a roundtable to discuss further and start this conversation that you have proposed. And so with that, let me go to start with UCA, United Chinese Americans. And I see Hai Pei and Jing Liang, they are president and chair of UCA. Perhaps they can lead in their reaction or response to your idea. And then John Yang, who's also here, you can also name Advancing Justice as one of the organizations. And others who are either on the panel, please raise your hand so I can identify the order that you can comment. And also from those in the audience, then Professor Pei can elevate you to the panel to join the discussion. So please use all those channels. And at this point, let me start with Haipei and Jing Liang. Who would you like to go first?
Well, Jing, why don't you go ahead and yeah.
Jing Liang, muted.
Yeah, Haipei, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, is this is about a quick up?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Jing Liang, we can hear you now.
Okay. All right. Hey, Paula, really, we appreciate your idea. And this is an area I totally agree with you that the Chinese American, Asian American are lacking in the public, especially in mainstream media. And we have seen events come up again and again, but we really don't see our faces, our voices reflected in print, in TV, limited. I just think there should be more. And we definitely, from UC standpoint, we talk to Haipei from time to time, thinking about how we can make some inroads in this. And I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. And we have tried to, there was a professor at University of Tennessee, Huan Ming, who was prosecuted unfairly by the federal government. And we made some effort with the Knoxville News. And actually, similar to what you have suggested, it was very successful. We talked to the editor of the newspaper, and they were delighted to meet us. And they were actually followed up with an article, especially by a reporter, re-interviewed many community members, and it was really published on the local newspaper. And we have tried to write editorials to them, but it was not published. And but again, there are other publications, editorial letters that are published. And I think it's certainly we have the desire and motivation to do it. Maybe the second thing that I have to say is we need to create some training so that we know how to do it. And so from a national organizational standpoint, we need to think about how we want to champion some individuals so that their faces can be a voice, can be a base, can be a voice for the Chinese American community. Right now, we don't have anybody I think that people can familiar with. Yeah. So I'm going to stop there and have Haipei to chime in.
I do a 1 minute quick thing. I want to say that again, definitely thanks, Paula, for your suggestion. I have been thinking about it every single day about it without a good answer to that. I think maybe it's helpful, and as Jeremy also suggests, maybe we could have after this put a few media savvy people together and have an informal roundtable on a Zoom and go from there. Now, what I do want to remind everybody here is UC had a webinar about McCarthyism by a New York Times bestseller. And I asked him, the author, I said, what did the media do in the 50s? And his answer is either the media played along with it or been silent. Now, I want to make a contrast of that. And many of you here has made a huge contribution to the Fall of China initiative. I would say that during the last 3 years, ever since the China initiative has been initiated, the media actually played a good role in that. And that is really a sea change in it. And we should not belittle that. And maybe there's something even more we can do of that. Just a quick footnote on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Haipei. John Yang, would you provide your reply? And I guess you're speaking on behalf of not just Advancing Justice AJC, but perhaps the Asian American Advancing Justice and perhaps ANCAPA. So would you clarify that and then provide your comments.
Sure. So for those that aren't familiar, NCAPA is the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans. That's a group of about 40 organizations, national Asian Pacific American organizations. And I think, Jeremy, just introducing it that way is helpful, is to think about all of the different coalitions that we belong to and sort of how we use them. Because I appreciate what you said, Hai-Pei, is I do think that the media has been a force for good in some places, right? Whether it is with the China initiative. The other place is even on COVID-19, we did make a point very early on, literally it was January of 2020, meeting with the Washington Post editorial board, New York Times editorial board. We didn't do LA Times because we don't have to reach out there, but to talk to them about why the term China virus, Wuhan flu was so stigmatizing. And to their credit, and the journalists across the country, obviously, the World Health Organization, CDC, helped in all of these ways as well, to say, well, that's a stigmatizing term, that's racist, let's not do that. And so we saw that sea change. And I think that's right, is we have to continue to frame these narratives around Asian American history, around, sort of the US-China tensions in a way that is positive, and then meet with all of these individual editorial boards. The other thing for me that's very important is how do we continue to train our advocates to do that media? Because I have had the fortune to do at least some media around all of this, but we need more people. We need diverse people too. It's like, I am a Chinese American male. That is limited, right? Obviously, there are times that a Chinese American, straight male will be helpful in this conversation, but there are going to be times that we need other voices, diverse voices, even within our own community. So how do we continue to train all of those people in all the different geographies so that when something comes up in Tennessee or something comes up in Louisiana, we have that local spokesperson too. So that's what sort of the way I'm thinking about this in terms of the coalitions, but then also how we continue to train so that we're set wherever we go to have that right person, be that right spokesperson, deliver that right message in a way that the media can pick up on, and that will actually change that narrative. So that's in some ways a broad answer, but just I think, in terms of how we all should be thinking about it, like who's ready to be trained, how do we get them trained, and then who's ready to sort of talk to their local media, how do we get them before them, and then making sure that we all have the right talking points so that we do get on media, we don't sort of say something that causes us to be like, ooh, that's not quite right. Because like, as you heard, and I'm sorry for going on a little bit, Jeremy, but this to me is very important, is like, I am very, very concerned about sort of how we can be divided from other communities, whether it is around education, whether it is around, even the sort of how we talk about racial justice. There are times that sort of people want to portray us as the mono minority because that benefits, frankly, sort of white Caucasians. And so we got to be careful of that and making sure that we talk about this the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Please, Paula.
Well, one of the things, and thank you for all the comments. I'm really thrilled to hear that this is being well received. One of the things that happened very early in my career, many years ago in Dallas, was we had an organization of the local Black journalists, and what we did, not compromising our own positions as journalists, we held a series of seminars which we tried to expand across the country, and it was called, and these were directed to the African American community. It was called How to Get into the News Without Committing Murder, a seminar on Black access to the media. That's what it was called. I'll never forget the title because I created the title, right? And if you extrapolate from that, you understand that this was local Black journalists working with the local Black community to teach them what is newsworthy. What is newsworthy from the perspective of reporting on the news, and what is newsworthy and would be interesting, for example, to the editorial board. So one of the things that might be the case, I'm no longer a member of AAJA, but I think we could approach the Asian American Journalists Association, because working with them, they have many, many chapters. They're spread out all across the country. And to work with them and their local chapters on how to, what are the how-tos, right? Because what we're not asking for is only tell one kind of story. We're not asking them to color nor shade a story. What we're asking for is help us understand what you are looking for. And in the interim, what happens is, then we also had, by the way, we had mock news conferences. And what would happen in a mock news conference? It wasn't so much to teach people what to say, but to prepare them for what would happen in a news conference. What should you come equipped with? What should you be prepared to answer? What kinds of questions are we going to ask you? Now I will go in a different vein to say that then there were people who were no longer working journalists like me. I'm no longer a working journalist. There were some of us who would be fully prepared to teach you how to be camera ready, fully prepared to instruct and inform how to come equipped with a certain kind of information, a certain kind of demeanor, and a willingness to correct when necessary, even when there's a camera pointed in your face, right? So this for me is all about, it's about education. It's about not working with any one particular organization, because I think that doesn't serve any of us well, right? And John, by the way, the executive editor of the LA Times is my boy from 40 years back, Kevin Merida, right? So wherever there are in the country, for example, there will be people who at least can, you know, sort of help with the introductions. And I know I'm going on really long, but I think that I want to acknowledge for sure that there are people here who are fully prepared and knowledgeable and skilled at how to do this. But then if we pick places like a Memphis or a Kansas City or Albany, New York, there might be people in those communities who are not necessarily as savvy. And when whatever that event or those events happen in those communities, you can't always count on bringing in someone from a national organization. The local community has got to be ready and equipped and educated, and most importantly, has to overcome the no, I don't want to talk. That's one of the biggest hurdles we're going to have to get over as we're working with local communities. We have to talk, because by not talking, we're not able to tell our own story. It's our narrative. Let us define our narrative.
Thank you, Paula. I just read a note from Robert. Do you want to share that information in terms of the AAJA, the CEO or executive director?
Sure. You can go ahead and send it out as well. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Paula, because my daughter-in-law is actually the executive director of AAGA.
So as we talk, network at the same time.
Yeah, so, and she can be a lot more active than me because I'm out here in Guam and she's in DC.
And she is great. She is absolutely wonderful.
So with that, I see other on the panel. Daniel, would you like to speak on behalf of the CIRCA initiative?
Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm happy to just say a couple words. I really appreciate what you said, Paula, and I think that this community could really benefit from a task force or a strike force, as you described it, on these issues. I just want to echo the comment that I made in the chat. I'm very happy to be a part of follow-up discussions. I know that some of our colleagues on the for-profit side, on the China project, which is itself, a very kind of fleshed out multimedia platform, they themselves would also be quite interested, I think, in pushing this work, although they explicitly focus a little bit more on the U.S.-China relationship than they do on the Asian American diaspora. I think these are messages that are very core and central to their interests as well. And I think with their amplification and their promotion mechanisms in mind, I think we can spread this awareness a lot further. So very happy to be involved and really grateful, Jeremy, for the invitation to be a part of this.
Thank you, Daniel. We also have Xing Yang, who's from Chinese for Affirmative Action. Xinyang, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Paula, and to everybody here for inviting us. My name is Xin Yan. I'm the Director of Communications at the San Francisco-based Chinese for Affirmative Action. We were founded in 1969 to protect the civil rights of Chinese Americans and to advance a multiracial democracy. In 2000, we led the Coalition Against Racial and Ethnic Scapegoating to fight and challenge the criminal prosecution of Wenho Lee. And more recently, I just want to give a shout out to our advocacy manager, Nick, who is a local Houstonian who has been taking on the fight against SB 147 in Texas. I really, what you've mentioned, Paula, really resonates with us. I think we'd be really interested in participating, in part because the anti-China sentiment has reached a fever pitch. We all need to coordinate across the country amongst different coalitions and organizations to challenge, because we just can't do it alone. Recent hearing on, very controversial hearing on TikTok has been extremely disturbing. There are 150 million TikTok users across the country, mostly young people. And this hearing sends a message to them that China is a danger and a threat. And that's all they're learning and listening to. And we can go on. There was the balloon gate. And so we believe that this crisis will not end. And so it'd be really important for us to band together. So thank you, Paula. We'd love to participate.
Thank you, Xinyang. Next, Les Wong is the President Emeritus of San Francisco State University. And he has been a key leader in organizing Asian American college administrators. So Les, let me invite you to say a few words.
Jeremy, thank you, and thank everyone else in today's session. It's been quite valuable. As many of you know, there are so few Asian American presidents and chancellors in the 400 universities and colleges in America. The latest ACE data puts us at less than 1% of the presidents and chancellors' offices, even though Asian Americans earn 16 to 20% of all the PhDs each year in America. So once you, as successful faculty members, we're seen as successful teachers, scholars, doctors, etc., but we're not seen very much as leaders of campuses. I only know of 2 athletic directors at the Division I level. There have been a number of Chinese American football coaches at Division I schools that winning national titles never offered a head coaching job in their careers. We decided that we needed to organize current presidents and myself, retired presidents, to form a network of support for the round of newly appointed chancellors that have occurred in the last 4 to 5 months. It really has been a pleasant blossoming of Asian American presidents at both private and public universities. And our goal is to provide support for these new presidents, provide support for all executive leaderships, vice provosts, and up. We've had a number of requests from deans and department chairs. There just is no mentoring system to getting young academics into the administrative line to the corner office. So our goal is twofold, is to unite the presidential level and then open that pipeline up to start mentoring other scholars who are moving up the administrative level. We are very fortunate. The American Association of Colleges and Universities sponsored a free forum on March 6th. We had over 80 people sign up from around the country. It was quite enthusiastic. People want to meet. We're trying to set up perhaps a physical face-to-face meeting. And the excitement over a team of mentors, support. In fact, what Paula is saying, we're going to start doing seminars on how to get up in public with a camera in your face and talk about being a leader and leading a campus. Part of our concern was, at least in my generation, I'm 15 and a half years as a university president. I noticed a number of colleagues around me who Asian American, who for the slightest misstep, lose their jobs faster and quicker than any other presidential group I've seen in higher education. My article in a book is coming out this coming fall. I called it High Expectations, Short Fuses. And it's as if we have all the credentials intellectually, et cetera, to get into the chancellor's office. But boy, we make one little mistake and we're out of there in a flash. We've also seen the same issue in the military, where, as I recall, there are only 2 generals of Asian American background, a couple colonels, et cetera. But the backbone of the Army, the non-commissioned officers, some of them you might have seen testify during the early Iraq years, where they asked the young man, how many soldiers will be needed to overcome the Taliban in Iraq. And he told the truth. He said about 800,000. And it was unbelievable. No one wanted to even put 50,000 troops into the country. He was terminated the next day by the Army. His name will come to me. He, general from Hawaii, was appointed chair of the Veterans Administration, which in those days, about a decade ago, was really in a disastrous shape. He couldn't turn it around. And months later, he was terminated. The problems still haven't been fixed, and all of the leadership of the Veterans Administration have kept their jobs. So the question is, why is it that, first of all, it's hard to get to the corner office, and yet so easy to get thrown out over controversies, et cetera, that, in my opinion, are pretty minor kinds of things. So some of us are speaking out. I wanted to credit Frank Wu, who's with CUNY, our Jeremy Clarence with C100. There's a small group of us at the Asian American Research Institute at CUNY who are organizing, and we're preparing for our second meeting ever in the coming months. So thank you, Jeremy. And it really is gaining a lot of steam. A lot of young scholars, their complaint is their biggest fear is the public side of being a president. They just don't want to get in front of cameras. They don't want to be out speaking publicly. And we're going to try and resolve some of that fear.
Thank you. Let me go to Stephen Pei at this point, and then to be followed by Helen Shi.
Thank you, Jeremy. And thanks to Les and all of you who share your resources with, and Les and Roger. I could not find Roger earlier. Thank you for sharing your resources with us. I think I really want to thank Paula, because this time when we have SB 147, before we reach out to her, she was the one who reached out to us and offer her support. You may have seen some coverage of the national media of what happened in Texas. But without Paula, we will have to take out Los Angeles Times. We will have to take out NBC. We will have to take out ABC and a few others. If without Paula, our national exposure will be much, much less. And I actually have a very specific request to Paula. we do learn a lot from the Black community. We are having weekly meeting with Congressman Al Green and also the Houston branch of the NAACP. I was shocked because when they commit to have weekly meeting, even though they have very busy schedule, so we meet at different time of the week. But so far, 3 weeks in a row, we meet weekly. And we agreed to have a joint effort in the center of Houston with all the different ethnic groups, talking about a coalition of people of color on May 13th. But May 13th is too far away. My request is much sooner, because in 3 weeks, we are going to organize rallies and marches in multiple cities in Texas. So we don't want to let this topic die. And we have also weekly town hall meetings hosted by State Representative Jing Wu. She is really leading the whole effort in Texas right now in this pushing back. So I think in April, Easter time, we have to keep things going. We hope this time with the multiple cities synchronized whole thing on the weekend, we can get good media coverage. By the same token, I think I can see Helen is here. I think she's going to talk about that. I'm going to steal her thunder. She is our outreach director in all this effort. And I think she has been talking about to invite people to do some media training. Because in 3 weeks, after we have this multiple city event happen, then some people will be interviewed. In this town hall meeting, we have not only the people from Houston, but also from Austin, from Dallas. We even have people all the way from California to Tennessee, to Georgia, to North and South Carolina coming to the town hall meeting. As we talk about this, this is no longer a Texas event. This is a national event. So if you can come, I want to book your time next Sunday. Okay. So there'll be what, 6 p.m. California time, Sunday night. So I think if you can start doing the training 2 weeks before the event to all the participants, I think we should get some more people ready in 2 weeks to face the media. Thank you.
I'm sorry, is this a virtual virtual?
That's a virtual. That's the only way we can get people all the way from East Coast to West Coast.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Helen,
Steve.
I stole your thunder.
Thank you, Dr. Pei, actually, for mentioning about that. And actually, Dr. Pei, thank you for making the connection with Paula. I'm just so thrilled to meet with Paula because, you know, to see that we have really the Chinese heritage and African-American heritage and Jamaican heritage all in together, right? This is really our treasure, our blessing to have Paula to mentor our community. And in particularly, I totally agree with all the panelists who have commented about the public image and social influence of our community. You know, we are just not there yet. You know, we are always seen as worker bees, as a model minority for this country and for the world. But now, you know, this is the opportunity that we can make a difference, right? So I have a few notes. Yes, one is Dr. Pei has mentioned about I've been wanting to do the media training since day one because our first day of the event was held in Fort Bend in part of Houston, and then the media was there. So ever since the first rally we were trying to organize, the media have been quite supportive, except that we need better media training and to bring our message out. And like all of the panelists have mentioned about. The other thing is, I'm the senior advisor for community affairs in UCA. You know, my colleagues Pei and Jin Liang have also commented about how important it is to bring our voice out. In fact, we had a project called the Op-Ed project. And thanks to my colleague in UCA, me and myself and few other people in UCA, we were able to attend this op-ed project, which I really learned a great deal. And I was actually able to publish my op-ed in Atlanta Journal of Constitution right after the Atlanta shooting back in 2021. And my op-ed is about the healing of racism in the soul of America. It was very well received as well. So there's just really so much we have to do to elevate our voice. And in my particular personal interest is, and this is probably a question for all of our leaders and Paula in particular, is how we can bring the stories, our personal stories as Asian American, as a Chinese American, to the broader audience. Because very often we are kind of, on our side, we tend to be, introvert, we're shy, we're not willing to go out to meet with other community members. On the other hand, the mainstream media doesn't have much interest in our community. So it's really the problem on both sides. And my question is how we can work together to really amplify and tell our stories, change our narratives. That's something that I'd love to hear from all of you, how to make this happen.
Paula, please, yeah, go ahead.
So as to make this, I think, a more efficient initiative, I would propose that we have a separate meeting that's going to deal specifically with this topic. Mm-hmm. And that, any people who are being invited to participate, that we bring issues to the table, and then we specifically set up seminars for training how to, right? So there's the how to. There's the how to get media coverage. I think, Helen, when you just said that there's not that much interest, interest can be made to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And that has to do with, again, a training as to what would get the media's attention, right? Once you understand what they're looking for, then you figure out who would be suited and what would be the topic, feature or hard news wise, that would get their attention, right? So there are ways absolutely of doing this. And I think that one of the things to also explore in setting up a future meeting might be to find, and I'll say it this way, retired journalists, right? So those of us who are no longer having to deal with questions of conflict of interest, those of us who are former journalists who absolutely can train and teach and help formulate. And then there are people like me who have connections into all kinds of news organizations, even in the state of Texas, where I might be able to help get coverage and so forth. But this is really one where I think we probably should set up a separate discussion that's dealing solely with this topic. And it can be in the field of education, in the field of politics, in the field of discrimination, policing, et cetera. But it really has to do with how we empower our community to speak up. And again, I will use the phrase, to take hold of our own narrative and make sure that that narrative is told fairly. And when it's not told fairly, that we also teach how to confront the misinformation and get it corrected. So I think it's all about the rules. What are the rules of engagement? And who are we equipping and teaching how to bear those arms for that engagement? And it's all going to be about words and philosophies and all the above. But it has to be seen as we're in a battle. And we're in a battle for accuracy and fair coverage and depictions.
Thank you, Paula. That's very helpful. Yeah.
Paula, I think John Yang earlier talked about a symphony to put the pieces together. the symphony needs a conductor. And I would like to ask you to be the conductor. We'll be glad to try to gather all the organizations together for such a meeting. And hopefully timing is also working out, will be working out for everyone. I would propose that before the start of May, which is the Heritage Month, that we convene such a roundtable, get together, whatever the term may be, and put the rules together, at least start the conversation on the rules. And for all the organizations that are interested, they're welcome to join, and we'll put it out in the newsletter with the invitation. And there are some participants who are also interested, but they are not speaking today or with the time constraint and all that. So I think you can see the synergy of what has developed. And so my proposal is that within the next 2 or 3 weeks or before the Heritage Month, we convene such a gathering, a conversation. And so we'll work together on an agenda and open it up. And we need to follow up. We can't just talk about ideas. We need to follow up with actions. That's my proposal.
And so I would counter propose that pick a date the week of April 17th.
Okay.
And between now and then, I will reach out to some journalists, some Asian American journalists who I know, who I think would be very willing to participate. And you invite representatives of different organizations, with the idea being that what we then do as what we come up with is, first of all, we have to address what's happening in May, right? So whatever's happening in Texas in May, maybe there's another group in the middle of this that's going to work specifically about this more immediate issue. And then there's another group that's going to deal with and setting up the conversations and the trainings around longer term. And by longer term, I don't mean a year out, I mean maybe 2 months out. Right. But I do believe that if we can get into the mindset of right now, for as much as we don't want to believe it is, we are in a crisis. Right. And as evidenced by the whole TikTok, I mean, we're in a crisis, and we're going to have to begin to address this strongly and immediately.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Agreed. So I'm pretty poor timekeeper, but these conversations are so vital, so important. So at this point, I don't see any other hands up. And I'll defer to Stephen and Vincent for any closing remarks at this time before we adjourn. Stephen, any remarks?
I think it's not only just the roundtable discussion. We have this one, the middle one with Paula. I think if you look at the chat room and Q&A, I think we're getting a lot of compliment. I think we have a very good session today. We sent Paula and all the speakers and all the people who participate in the discussion. I think we still have a long way to go. We're rolling the stone up the hill. We cannot stop. Thank you.
Vincent, are you on?
He still have a full-time job.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I think we mentioned a few times that May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And our next meeting will be on Monday, May 1st to start the month. Yeah. So with all with that, I guess at this point, we shall adjourn unless there's some last minute comments.
Yeah, I just want to get a permission for Paula to release the video today. We'll
Yes.
chat with other speakers as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a wonderful meeting today, but a lot of work happens between meetings too. So with that, going once, going twice, and otherwise we're adjourned. Thank you very much, the speakers as well as the participants. Have a great week. Bye-bye.